Hi everyone. In this video I want to talk with you a little about the economic model called oligopoly. Now in the next video we're going to do some analysis using game theory. But for this video we're just going to kind of describe the industry. The term oligopoly means few sellers, just as monopoly meant one seller. Monarchy means one ruler. Oligarchy means few rulers. So oligopoly, few sellers. Now oligopoly is a much more realistic market model than is monopoly, pure monopoly, which has one seller unregulated by government, or pure or perfect competition, which has many sellers, each selling an identical product with no barriers to entry, etc. There are lots and lots of industries that are comprised of a few very large firms. Automobiles, for example, beer, producers of airlines, things like that. Typically, the highly capital-intensive industrial manufacturing type industries are comprised of very large firms. Now, there's not a lot of room for a whole bunch of firms, so the industry is usually made up of a very few very large firms, oligopoly. Now, the problem with modeling oligopoly is this. There's a complication in oligopoly that didn't arise with either pure competition or pure monopoly. With both of those two industries, all we needed to know was the revenue relationships and the cost relationships. Basically, the demand curve is all we needed to know, the demand curve that faced the individual firm, and from that we could derive all the revenue relationships that we needed. And then we needed to know the cost side of the picture, primarily average cost and fixed costs, and then we could derive all the cost relationships that we needed. And once we knew the revenue relationships and the cost relationships for those two models, perfect competition and pure monopoly, we could derive the equilibrium profit maximizing output, the profit maximizing price, and the efficiency implications. But we need another piece of information for oligopoly, and that is because oligopoly is characterized by a phenomenon that economists call mutual interdependence. Mutual interdependence. What that means is that in order to determine what the profit maximizing strategy is for a particular firm, it must consider what the rival firms are doing. Remember, the rival firms in the industry are large enough to affect the industry. They're large enough to affect the supply. They can increase the supply or decrease the supply, and so therefore any particular firm must, in an oligopolistic industry, must consider revenue, must consider costs, and must consider what the other firm or firms are doing. Now, this wasn't necessary in pure competition because in pure competition, no firm in the industry was large enough to have any impact whatsoever on the industry. No particular firm. Each firm was a mere grain of sand on a vast beach of firms. With monopoly, the monopolist didn't have to worry about the other guy either. Why? There was no other guy. He was the only seller. And when we go on in Chapter 15, talk about monopolistic competition, you'll see that the firms in a monopolistically competitive industry don't have to worry about the other guys either. Just oligopoly, mutual interdependence. As a result, it's hard to model, and there are lots of different models for an oligopolist. One model that your author discusses is something called the Cournot model. That's how you pronounce that word, C-O-U-R-N-O-T, the Cournot model. Essentially, all the Cournot model is saying that given a duopoly, it's a funny sounding word, but it means two sellers instead of monopoly, duopoly. Given a duopoly, the outcome is going to be more efficient than that of the monopolist and less efficient of that of the purely competitive firm. That's really all you need to know about the Cournot model. It's very simple and applies to only a limited case where there are two sellers. There's another model in here, however, in the textbook that's very interesting, and that's called the price leadership model. Essentially, the price leadership model says that there will be very little price competition. The largest firm in the industry, or the one with the deepest pockets, will be able to dictate to all of the other firms what price they will charge. The logic behind that is this: no small firm is going to try to cut prices on the large firm. The smaller firms, none of the smaller firms, will engage the largest firm in the industry in a price war, in mutually destructive price warfare, because the smaller firm is destined to lose that fight. The large firm could, if it wanted to, drive the other firm out of business. Oh, you want to take us on in a price war? Okay, well, we will show you. We will lower our price so low that we will take a loss. And if you're going to sell any units of output at all, you too will have to price your product so low that you can take the loss. Because we are the bigger firm, we can stand to take the losses for the longest period. And so, once you take a loss until you go out of business, then we will become more monopolistic. We will grab your customers, and we'll make up those losses in future profits by being able to raise the price without having you as a competitor. Now, that strategy is known as predatory pricing. And as it turns out, predatory pricing, that is pricing with the intent of driving your competitor out of business, is a violation of antitrust policy, antitrust laws. So, the problem, though, with the government in prosecuting the antitrust laws is to prove that the firm lowered its price specifically to drive the other guy out of business, rather than because the firm was more efficient or more cost-effective or was willing to take a lower profit or something like that. That would be a problem. Now, another problem for a firm that might cut prices on the largest firm and engage them in a price war is that the larger firm can just go to the stock exchange and buy up the smaller firm's stock. The smaller firm's management will be replaced by the larger firm's management. It's so long to the smaller firm. This is known as a hostile takeover. Now, certain types of mergers are violations of antitrust policy. So antitrust has kind of got these issues covered, but once again, the problem is the government prosecuting the violating firm and proving intent. Now, there are a couple of other models that I want to deal with in the next video, and these will require the use of game theory, on which you are already an expert because you've seen the first two videos in this section. So stay tuned, and we're going to talk about how game theory applies to the oligopolistic market model.